Ladies and gentlemen, my purpose here is to speak with you about Hamlet's first soliloquy, Act 1, Scene 2. There are several things I want to speak with you. First, I want to talk to you about why I have it on a board like this and why that may be helpful in terms of teaching it to your students. And then secondly, I'm going to go through the entire soliloquy, phrase by phrase, line by line, image by image, in hopes of digging deeper into it and illuminating it in such a way that you might be able to use it for your students, or if you're a student who's watching this, that you'll be able to have a deeper and richer appreciation for Hamlet. So let me speak first about why I have it on the board like this. You've watched any number of detective shows, you've seen shows with lawyers, you've probably seen movies where there were mathematicians. One of the things you'll see them do occasionally is they'll start doing equations or posting the photographs of criminals or posting evidence on a board. And the reason they do it has everything to do with being able to see within a particular space. It gives you spatial awareness. If you do it in this size, your students are going to be better able to understand connections that you point out to them within the whole frame of the soliloquy itself, rather than turning pages or dipping their head down to watch a sheet, whatever the case might be. That's why I do it. It's a better way to see patterns, and it's a better way to see connections. So let me set you up first with the mood and the atmosphere that dominates this first soliloquy. Hamlet has returned home. He was not present when he found out that his father died. He wasn't present, he wasn't there to say goodbye to his father. So his trip back from Wittenberg to Denmark must have been torturous. Probably what he had in mind was that when he returned, his mother would comfort him. Instead, what he finds is his mother has married an uncle who he despises. He comes into the court on the day, presumably, that his uncle is crowned king, certainly on the day that he marries his mother. And he has nothing to say. He is both a prince and a human being with an inner life. But he has a public life and a private life. He cannot violate that public life. He has to keep his mouth shut. The soliloquy ends with, "But break my heart, for I must hold my tongue." Why must he hold his tongue? Because he's a prince, and he cannot let the public know what he thinks about the king, about this incestuous marriage, about the low regard with which he now thinks of his mother. He can't say any of those things. So he is boiling inside. He has been trapped just before the soliloquy begins by his mother and by his father into staying in Elsinore, not going back to Wittenberg. His father has publicly, his uncle has publicly humiliated him by admonishing him about the proper way to mourn his father. Everyone leaves, they're going to the reception at this point. Claudius feels he's done a good day's job, and Hamlet is left alone. And now he turns and he speaks to you, to the audience. Now remember what a soliloquy is. A soliloquy is the character's inner life coming to you, directly to the audience, but it's also more than that. Shakespeare found a way within the soliloquy not only to show you what's going on in the character's mind, but also to show you how he thinks. The shifts, the meanderings, the loopings back. It's difficult to do this in drama. It's difficult to do stream of consciousness. If you think of something like Joyce's last 60 pages of Ulysses, and you go and now look at Molly's soliloquy, that 60 pages of stream of consciousness, you're going to see something that looks far different than this. Joyce probably came a little bit closer to what that stream of consciousness is actually like. Shakespeare is dealing with an even more stylized reality. But in doing it this way, he shows you how deeply disturbed and upset Hamlet has become. Not unhinged, but not well. So let me begin. The first image, "Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew." Break the image down. You take an image and you make it flesh. And what that means is you have to bring the image out of the abstract and you have to make it tangible. So what he's describing here is this: the soiled flesh as well as the flesh that is too solid. Now, I've seen both translations used depending upon the editor, but I think Shakespeare actually means it to be both meanings. This flesh is solid. This flesh is also soiled. This flesh is filthy. This flesh puts me in the world. And so what does he want? 3 verbs. When you're reading Shakespeare, when you're reading difficult texts, always follow the verbs. The verbs will take you through the action. He wants his flesh to melt. So if my flesh is melting, it falls off of my body, it falls to the floor. It doesn't fall in liquid form, it falls in glops, it falls in goops. And what happens once it's there? It thaws, which means now it becomes liquid. 3rd verb, it resolves itself into a dew. What Shakespeare's just described as the evaporation cycle. And that seems odd until you think this, that Hamlet is so in such deep pain that what he wants more than anything else is not death. He wants oblivion. He wants not to exist. He wants absolute and complete negation. And if that won't do, well, there's always suicide, except look what follows up in the second half of the sentence. Or that the everlasting had not fixed his canon against self-slaughter. Now, what does this tell you? First of all, it tells you Hamlet's a believer. He's not an agnostic and he's not an atheist. Why does he hesitate in committing suicide? Because the everlasting, proper noun, substitute for God, has said within his laws that he may not commit suicide. So Hamlet's trapped. He is trapped within a vessel that feels nothing but pain. The pain becomes even more demonstrable here. How weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seem to me all the uses of this world. The crucial word being all. And absolute. No exceptions whatsoever. And so what is it about this world? The world is weary. It is wearisome. It is stale. Utterly without any kind of freshness. Flat. Dull. Uninspiring. And unprofitable. Now, don't think of this in mercenary terms. Think of this in this example. My day has profits and losses. My day is good or bad. Has my day had more profits than losses in that day? That's how he's using it. His day is unprofitable. The whole world is nothing except, look what he does here. His mind shifts. His mind shifts. His mind shifts. The red shows you those shifts. He's trying to escape the pain of his consciousness, but he cannot. It keeps looping back. Just as your pain keeps looping back. Whenever you have something that's deeply troubling you, it's the first thing on your mind in the morning. It's the last thing on your mind when you go to bed at night. And you can't escape it. And because you can't escape it, it causes such terrible anxieties. You cannot focus on anything else. 'Tis an unweeded garden. What 'tis? This is the important word. The world is an unweeded garden that grows to seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. You cannot think in terms of traditional American gardens that you might see, which might have weeds, which sometimes might look as if they were poorly planned. You have to think in terms of Elizabethan gardens, which were geometric, which were pristine. So here he compares his mind to something that grows to seed, things growing everywhere, no order to them whatsoever. And what grows there? Things that are rank and gross, things that are disgusting, images that he cannot get out of his head. And later on in this soliloquy, you're going to see exactly what images he's referring to or implying. As should come to this but 2 months dead, he keeps coming back to this idea of time. He cannot believe. The betrayal is bad enough. The fact that the betrayal happened within the space of less than 2 months is even worse. So excellent a king that was to this Hyperion to a satyr. So here is my father, who was Hyperion, a god. Here is a satyr, half man, half goat, who spends all of his time drinking and debauching. That's Claudius. So loving to my mother that it might not beteem the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly. Now don't be confused by this. He's not talking about Claudius there. Who is it who might not beteem the winds of heaven? Her father. King Hamlet. And what does that mean? This is an image of such love and such affection. I want you to think of the winter wind. It strikes your cheek. It feels red. It makes it raw. And if King Hamlet had had the power, what did he try to do? Figuratively, cover her cheek. Make sure that it felt soft. Make sure that even something as utterly out of control as the wind, he would make an attempt to protect her even from that. That's how much he loved her, according to young Hamlet, which means he had to have witnessed affection between them. Heaven and earth, must I remember? He cannot. Yes, he must remember, because he has no control over it. Why, she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on. Now here, it gets even weirder. Because the appetite is not only the appetite of love, it's also lust. So he's making a commentary here about the way his mother draped herself on his father, and why would he be thinking about affection in those terms? This is a mother thinking about his son and his father. Well, Hamlet's not abnormal. Hamlet is just under such enormous strain, and he cannot get this out of his head. Must I remember? He doesn't want to. And yet within a month, comes back to that again. Frailty, thy name is woman. He even uses an adjective to describe what all women are, based on the example of his mother. A little month, or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body like Niobe, all tears. For all I know, she wore the same shoes to his funeral that she now wears to the wedding feast. Why, she, even she, oh God, a beast that once discourse of reason would have mourned longer. It's almost as if he is so upset here he can barely find the words to register his disgust. And what he comes up with is awful. His mother is worse than a beast, because even a beast would have mourned. Even a beast that wants discourse of reason, that cannot reason. A dog would have mourned longer than his mother. Married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules within a month. He makes reference to her eyes, to her tears. Look how much time he spends speaking about his mother. This is a speech about betrayal. It's not only a mournful speech, it's a speech about blood betrayal. And finally, the weirdest part of all, he finally gets down here and says, "O most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets." Posting is a horseback riding term, and when someone is posting, they are going up and down on the saddle. Well, obviously there's a sexual connotation here. To post with such dexterity, it also means to move very quickly, move with great speed. With what? Dexterity, flexibility, to incestuous sheets. Now, who wants that image in his mind? The image of your mother and your uncle making love, and he cannot get it out of his head? It is not, nor it cannot come to good. It already hasn't come to good for Hamlet. And he's wise enough to know that this is such a terrible act, it's going to have long-term consequences. And finally, the line that perhaps breaks your heart the most, "But break my heart, for I must hold my tongue." He cannot speak to anyone. Who can he trust? So all of that is kept inside of him, boiling. And you and I both know what happens when it's kept inside for that long a period of time and boils. Ultimately, there's an explosion. Thank you.